Alexa, Talk Radio, please.
Talk Radio from News Broadcasting.
There's a couple of holes there. We're a little bit wet, but it was lovely. Don't get me wrong. Yeah, there are places there you can get away from your own club if you are on the clay course. But it's hopefully the rain will stop and we'll be able to get back to normal.
Well, we're just about out of time. As always, so great to talk to you, Jeremy. We'll talk again very soon. We've got some lot of good golf, obviously, to come. We're getting in towards the heart of the matter, and the Masters, of course, the first of the big four to come. Well, Howard Hughes will be with you after the news at 10 o'clock. Don't forget the podcast, Back Off the Stand, on should be out tomorrow, and it'll be a real highlight of everything that we've had involved in the programme today. And then on Wednesday, Back of the Stand, and the second podcast of the week, when we look at a specific subject from the middle hour. Thanks to my team and to all of you as well. Enjoyed the company throughout, and we'll speak again very soon. Good night.
Online, on DAB+, Talk Radio and Talk TV. On TV, on radio, and on your smartphone. This is Talk Radio and Talk TV. Talk Radio, on the hour news headlines.
News Centre at 10. Vladimir Putin claims Russia will be stronger as he heads for an unsurprising victory in the country's presidential election.
It's become clear for everyone. Whoever wants to threaten us or bully us, whoever wants to suppress us, they were not successful in the past and they will not be successful in the future.
Exit polls suggest he has 88% of the vote against no credible opponents. They're either dead, imprisoned or in exile. Earlier, the widow of the late Russian opposition leader Alexei Navalny told people, "Be brave, one day very soon we will win." Israel's Prime Minister has hit back at growing pressure from staunch ally the US, saying it won't stop the country achieving total victory against Hamas. Benjamin Netanyahu has repeated his determination to start a ground offensive in Rafah once the military allows civilians to leave.
We cannot have a future for Gaza, future for peace, future for Israel, if Hamas, a terrorist organization, remains intact.
Lib Dem leader Sir Ed Davey has told his party's spring conference that the UK can't wait a moment longer to see the back of the current government. The Transport Secretary, meanwhile, insists Rishi Sunak will lead the Tories into the next general election. Councils in England will have to consider whether residents support low-traffic neighbourhoods before bringing them in. Authorities are also being told to only introduce 20-mile-an-hour speed limits where necessary. National Highways says things are on track to reopen the M25 in the morning. A stretch in Surrey has been shut since Friday. In sport, Manchester United have come through an FA Cup classic against rivals Liverpool 4-3 to make the semi-finals. It keeps alive their hopes of lifting a trophy this season. Chelsea are also into the last four after an entertaining 4-2 victory over 10-man Leicester. In the Premier League, West Ham and Aston Villa drew 1-0. That's the latest. I'm Anna Bates.
Did you know that Sky Mobile has 99% network coverage? That means
That's like me.
commuters like me.
And farmers like...
Yeah, they all get 99% network coverage on Sky Mobile. Hello, Possible. The outdoor network available to 99% of UK population.
Picture this. You're at the beach this summer and the only Wi-Fi available is from Tony's phone. You could just ask him if you could use it. Tony seems like a nice, approachable person. Like an uncle. Uncle Tony. Oh, forget it. You wouldn't have the social bravery to ask anyway. Nobody does. No EU roaming fees this year means no awkward hunt for Wi-Fi. This is Supermarket Mobile. Tesco Mobile. Every little helps. Until 2025. For terms and roaming destinations, see tescomobile.com/home from home.
Have you heard the energy price cap is changing? I still don't really know what it is or what it actually means for my bills. I can't keep up with it all. Will it drive you mad?
No, mate. I'm with British Gas, so I'm already beating the price cap. I'll get the drinks in.
Don't worry. You don't have to know everything about the energy price cap. Because at British Gas, we're keeping our prices below the April cap with our fixed price tariff. And if we release an even better fixed tariff in the future, you can switch for free. Search British Gas tariffs. Eligibility and T's and C's apply.
Like Irish for life. For our very own stand-up comedian who's getting cheekier by the day. A bug lover and local celeb around the fire service, and the one who sits on my back whilst I do press-ups. When he shaved his head, I shaved mine. and so did all our friends. Such a loving wee son, whose resilience I'll never be able to understand. His name's Archie, and I'm racing for him.
No matter how cancer affects us, life is worth racing for. Sign up to your local event at raceforlife.org in partnership with headline sponsor Standard Life.
What a legend.
He's a quality striker.
No, not him. The electrician fixing those lights. He switched to QuickBooks because it has real help from real people.
That is truly game-changing.
Intuit QuickBooks. Simple, smart accounting software. Brilliant value at a shock-free price. That's how you business differently.
Night Talk. Sunday Talk. Talk Radio. A late-night specimen jar of the psychic, the supernatural, and simply unexplainable. The Unexplained with Howard Hughes. Sunday Night Radio from another dimension. Nationwide, by your side, Talk Radio and Talk TV.
Anything can happen in the next 2 hours, it probably will, across the UK on DAB digital radio and online worldwide at talkradio.co.uk. This is The Unexplained, the most ear-opening show on the air anywhere. From Bootle to Boomerang Beach in Australia, from Bradford to Bremerhaven, from Bloxwich to Bloemfontein, and from Bangor in Northern Ireland to Bangor in Maine, USA. The show's total mix of hard science, weird science, and pure paranormality every week. We do weird, we do science, we put it all in the washing machine, we mix it all up and we see what comes out. And we've been doing that now for 18 years as a podcast at theunexplained.tv and 8 years here on the radio, pretty much every single Sunday night, which is quite an achievement, the longest running show on Talk Radio. Very proud of that. Now tonight, this show had to be recorded earlier this week because for personal reasons I can't be here live, but it's a special edition featuring a number of people I'm sure you're going to want to hear. First up, Peter Robbins in New York on that explosive Nothing to See Here RO report about UAPs that was released just over a week ago and is still making people quite upset and quite polarized. Then we talk about the darkest side of conspiracy theories with Mariana Spring, who's got a new book out about that. Dr. David Whitehouse is in the right place to talk about space. That rhymes. And demonologist Jason McLeod is most of hour 2. If you want to be thrilled and chilled and spooked tonight, hour 2 is definitely the time and the place for that. Okay, The Unexplained then. Dateline, the 17th of March, 2024. John Culshaw having a night off this week. Well earned as well. Let's start with the ROUAP report. And it certainly ruffled a lot of feathers. 1 week ago on this show, disclosure activist Steve Bassett said this to us.
Schumer scared the hell out of him when he put in the big act, the act that would have essentially provided the entire basis to bring the information forward, the UAP Disclosure Act that included the UAP Disclosure Control Plan and all the powers necessary to enforce it. That's when it became real for everybody in the Pentagon or anywhere in the military intelligence complex that intend to see that truth embargo last until the day they die, if not forever, or all of the defense contractors that have been paid billions of dollars to do the research on this tech, but have plans to make billions more once disclosure is over, and their allegiance ultimately is to the shareholders and not to the United States, and so they push back, and they got the bill gutted, and then somebody in the Pentagon in some meeting raised their hand and said, you know, we gutted the bill, the world did not collapse. Let's go for it. Let's do what we did in the past. Right? We've done it before.
Well, it worked in the past, though, didn't it, Steve? That's the thing.
In 1969, it did, sure. They put forward the Colorado report. They shut down Blue Book, destroyed NICAP, and they thought they were free. But it didn't last that long. And they closed down the Clinton administration effort, and they thought they were free, but it continued. And they thought they could get away with it one more time. But no. And here is why. This isn't 1969, all right? This is 2024. There's 8 billion people, half of them are on the internet. There's billions of people on social media. This issue is known worldwide, and this thing is going to be eviscerated by the internet being used by hundreds and hundreds of millions of people that have just about had it, with defense departments of this nation and that nation lying into this war and that war and genocides and God knows what, and even lying about the reality around us. We have had it.
The thoughts of Steve Bassett there from my show exactly a week ago. Let's cross now to New York City, and my good friend Peter Robbins, investigator, author, man who's given a good portion of his life to this topic. Peter, thank you very much for doing this. How are you?
Good, Howard, and great to hear your voice again.
Well, also great to hear Steve Bassett. I've never heard Steve. I've heard Steve peeved. I've heard Steve tired from campaigning. I have never heard him so angry about something. What are your thoughts?
The report that came down from the Pentagon last week, in physics terms, for every action there is an equal and opposite reaction. The action has been an opening up, an increase in curiosity, more public activism, more politicians in America coming forward to say they support this. And I think what Steve is reacting to there, and righteously, is that old generation of secret keepers. Those folks who have been at the controls, moving the chess pieces without being elected, inheriting often their positions, and they don't want for any number of reasons to let it go. And there's blowback. Steve, in a way, was a living expression of it right then and there. But this past week, my first thought when I saw one news agency and network, whether it was the BBC or NPR or CNN or Fox, one after another, deeply reporting that it's all been a bit of a misunderstanding, folks, and actually a new permutation on the cover-up. It's not the old flying saucers and little green men, don't waste your time here. It's all wish fulfillment and I want to believe the X-Files stuff. No, we now feel that these whistleblowers, they're righteous. They're so far men of respect who have risked ridicule or their job by coming forward and reporting. The problem is, they didn't get it right. They heard something, they extrapolated in their minds. It's really no proof of this, folks. And, you know, like you, we'd like to see, you know, visitors from other planets, and we all long to blah, blah, blah. That's the reaction to every single news agency responding with click heels on this Pentagon report this week, which is simply not true. There are some UFOs, UAPs, that do fit into that category of truly anomalous, advanced technology from parts unknown, under intelligent control.
Indeed, and you investigated and wrote about the phenomena that unfolded at Rendlesham Forest in the UK in 1980, which we've talked about, both of us, many, many times before with many different people. That was a deeply unusual night. There are various accounts of it, but all of those various accounts would agree on one point. There was something deeply abnormal that happened there. To even think that that could be dismissed so lightly and so easily, I think, and this is just a personal view, is something of an insult to everybody involved. What are your thoughts?
That's the word I would use too, Howard. Insult for any thinking person who has even remotely looked at this material. You may recall that in the summer of 1997, which was a big year for the subject, the 50th anniversary of Roswell and Kenneth Arnold, and every UFO documentary that has been made was trotted out on American and British TV again, that the Air Force issued a report, very straight-facedly called Roswell Case Closed. It was more than 500 pages. It was perfect for keeping a door open. Their reading it was an insult to the intelligence. It's where they told us that it was crash dummies that had been misinterpreted as aliens, except the crash dummies didn't go into use until 1952, one of many nonsensical things that they threw at us. When they don't know what to do, they lie. And this is a big lie. It's backed up by the whole Pentagon, and again, relax, folks. We all understand, we all want there to be these wonderful unknown things. But no, we're alone in the universe, pretty much. That's all we can say.
Well, as we said, it's engendered a great deal of anger. Ross Coulthard in Australia, with his show on News Nation. Ross Coulthard, 24 hours ago, as I record these words with you. Remember that this is a recording that you will be hearing on the radio that was done earlier in the week. But this is what Ross Coulthard very quickly and very succinctly had to say about it.
Of all the ridiculous piles of steaming dog turd I've ever seen served up before the US Congress as a report that supposedly tells the truth about what's really going on inside the national security world, the Arrow Historical Review of UAPs was a big pile of steaming BS.
Well, I'd like to hear him when he gets annoyed. So that's Ross Coulthard's view of it. You're going to hear that from an awful lot of people. It's one thing to condemn, though, isn't it, Peter? But what do those people now do? Those people who've campaigned, people like yourself who've taken a view, who've weighed the evidence, who've come to a conclusion, and those people, don't forget, who are waiting in the wings, the whistleblowers. What does it say to them? What do all of them do now?
Basically, we keep doing what we're doing. This is a fight that has been going on for, gosh, at this point, more than 75 years. And you don't lie down simply because your opponent tells you to. We know they're wrong, and we know there is evidence. It's not out of the question that high-ranking people, even involved in formulating this report, are not cleared to see it. The term that the great Timothy Good kind of instilled in the public mind, above top secret, is not just a government designation. Above top secret can mean it's above your pay grade, even if you have a security clearance. When you don't know what to do, lie. And it happens at the institutional level as well as at the individual level, and I think this is a perfect example. I also feel that it's a backhand compliment to all of the people in public life, in journalism, people like Leslie Kean and Ralph Blumenthal, in American government, people like Kirsten Gillibrand and...
Well, there are people like Tim Burchett and Anna Paulina Luna and others on both sides.
Exactly, and that's the main thing, that they are on both sides. Do you think they've been studying this now, some of them for several years. They're smart people, they're well-read, they're connected, and they're seeing a reaction here that they've probably seen in other ways, in other aspects of government, not as dramatic, but when you don't know what to do, fake it. It's human nature, and we have put these secret keepers in a way up against the wall. Again, I'm guessing there are people within the establishment who are so tired of this nonsense, and who are rational thinking people, and who would like to see it all come to a head and sort itself out. We will live through this. We will go forward. Other people, maybe it's that sense of, I'll not only lose my power, but the person that I inherited it from, who, worshipped Harry Truman, they will lose all of the work that they did. I'll be ratting them out. It's a misplaced sense of loyalty. It's fear of the unknown in overdrive. What will happen? The same question they've been asking since 1947. The way that Steve Bassett began his polemic there, essentially, there was a mechanism in place, and it couldn't be allowed to function because we didn't know what would happen.
Well, Steve is a great believer in popular power. He thinks the people will demand. They will, email their Congress people, they will make a big fuss about this. Now, whether or not that happens, there is another factor here, and it's the last thing I'd like to ask you about. What are your thoughts on my belief that it is time for some of those whistleblowers to say, I don't care about the consequences for myself? Because we're way beyond that now. We have to do that for the nation. And if this is true, and if it isn't what it has been claimed to be, and that is misinterpretations, misreportings, we're not saying all of them, but, misreportings and all of those things. If it's true, and those people have the information, it's time for at least one of them to come out and say, here's the documentation, this is what I did, this is what I know, and I care not for the consequences. What do you say?
I say that kind of courage is rare and precious. But building on that very briefly, I had a guest on my radio show, Meanwhile Here on Earth, last week, Joe Bookman. Joe has run for the American Senate and the Senate of the state of Utah, I think 7 times, on a ticket of giving a pass, allowing anybody with security clearances in government who has any knowledge of this subject to come forward without any possibility of being prosecuted for it. And the other point that he is continually running for office on is this is real, it's true, we need to acknowledge it. I think that there are people who, well, you know, we have some very big name, David Grush right now, I guess, is the best known, respected name of a whistleblower who has come forward and damn the torpedoes. I think more of them would if they just had a human guarantee that they wouldn't go to jail or disappear into some equivalent of an American gulag for giving a state secret. You know, if you're me and you're older and you're on your own, sure, what the hell, here comes glory. But if you have a family,
and if you've got a life to lead, the stakes are high. So that is why, and you know, Grush was the one who implied. We've certainly had implications in the last year that some people have paid a very high price for their involvement and their transparency. So we'll have to watch this space, I guess, and just to remind my listener, this conversation was recorded some days before you're actually hearing it. Just to ask you quickly about this story we know will never go away, even if some people think it might. The story that was in the news a few days ago, researchers in Norway are searching a frozen lake that a UFO allegedly crashed into 77 years ago. There's a video of this thing that's online. I'm looking at a version by the Irish Star newspaper. Apparently this took place in the village of Vroros in 1947. The mayor of the village at the time claimed to have seen a craft crash into Lake Djupsoen, or Djupsjoen. My Norwegian pronunciation is not good, as you've just heard. Quotes, it looked like a rocket, made a lot of noise, said a photographer called Ru Rostad, whilst also recalling that it turned 180 degrees and landed in the lake. That's an interesting story, and that's just indicative, isn't it, of the kind of stuff that we will, whatever happens, keep hearing about.
I think so, and an interesting story it is. I'm looking at the same coverage you are. Who are we to say that it didn't happen? No question about it that the Norwegian UFO research community, which is not known for its sensationalism or wild claims, anything but. I know a number of members of the research community in that wonderful country, and, you know, they're not about being entertained or entertaining, and there is no question that the search that is going on now is the largest of its kind in the history of that country. Again, it could be something non-exotic. It could be a V2 that we have no record of its going up, but it came down
in 1947. And the point is, as we bring this to a conclusion, we must hope that whatever happens, that no one is deterred from doing investigations like that one, or the investigations that you've done, or anybody else who's asked questions. Because if we are deterred from asking questions because of this, then I think we are lost. And that's a bit of a concern. Peter Robbins in New York, thank you very much indeed. Please take care. My name is Howard Hughes. This is The Unexplained. Coming next, we're going to talk about the dark side of conspiracy theories. Stay here.
On the app, on your mobile, Talk Radio and Talk TV.
Whether it's a better seat, a bigger room, or a free cake with your coffee, we all love an unexpected upgrade, especially if you don't have to ask. With the Hyundai Tucson Hybrid Upgrade event, you get a complimentary upgrade to premium trim when you buy before the 31st of March. Plus, you get £1,750 towards your deposit and 6.9% APR representative. The Tucson Hybrid Upgrade event. It's the dawn of a new Hyundai. Trim upgrade available for SE Connected Premium. Finance subject to status. Hyundai UK is a credit broker, not a lender. Terms apply.
My bread and frying. Now it's oozing with style. My bedside table, a trend defining. The drawers just glide in. You're the one I want.
Find wardrobes and bedside tables from £59 in hundreds of styles and designs, and everything you want, all under one roof at Dunelm, the home of homes. Shop in store and online today.
When you contact your insurance company, you want to speak with a real person. At NFU Mutual, our insurance can be relied on, and that means providing outstanding personal service. With NFU Mutual, you can easily speak to your local agent or call our UK team. We do this so you can enjoy the more important things, No wonder 9 out of 10 customers choose to renew every year. For insurance you can rely on, join NFU Mutual today.
You alright, mate?
Oh, no, my boiler's knackered. Do you know any plumbers?
Yeah, I do, yeah. You know Danny? Well, he lives next door to this woman who's engaged to this lady who went to school with a bloke called Gary.
Alright. Is he a plumber?
No, he's not, no. But he knows a bloke who walks a dog with this woman. Debbie, I think she's called. Well, she gets her hair cut for Sam.
Don't worry, you already know somebody who fixes boilers. British Gas. And you don't even have to be one of our customers. Our engineers are local, and their work is guaranteed for 12 months. So it's British Gas boiler repairs.
So, is he a plumber? Technically not. But he's got a van.
It was the in thing to smoke. You felt good, you felt grown up.
Nobody who starts young ever thinks they'll smoke for life.
Never once thought I'd get cancer, not once. To tell your family you've got cancer through smoking. What up? Your kids, they thought they were going to lose them.
Up to 2 in 3 long-term smokers die from smoking. Be part of the change and help build a smoke-free generation. Quit smoking. For free support, search Smoke Free.
Feel the new Epic on 3. Trade in and save £304 on the Samsung Galaxy S24 Ultra powered by Galaxy AI. Plus, get 12 months of Paramount Plus, 28 days of roaming, and 300 gig of data included from £54 a month with £60 up front. Annual April airtime price rise of CPI plus 3.9% applies. Search 3 or head in store today.
Credit by 3. Terms apply. See 3.co.uk.
On your smart speaker, Talk Radio and Talk TV.
Coming to you from London, my name is Howard Hughes on a Sunday night. This is The Unexplained.
Howard Hughes.
Now, many times on this show over the years, I've spoken with people who have been behind or propounded or created what you might call conspiracy theories. Whether those conspiracy theories turned out to be right or wrong was not a concern of mine, but I just thought it was interesting in some cases to give those people airtime and house room. Now, over the last couple of days, I've spoken with Mariana Spring, the author of a new book called Among the Trolls. First-hand stories of the trolls and the trolled. It's all about conspiracy theories and how far they can go, and in some cases, the harm that they can cause. Mariana Spring, if you don't know, is the BBC's disinformation and social media correspondent. The conversation about her book Among the Trolls I found fascinating. See what you think. Mariana, a pleasure to talk with you, and if I may say so, congratulations on this book.
Thank you so much. It's very exciting.
Is your job, being the BBC's first disinformation and social media correspondent, risky? Because I would have assumed that it's a job that most of us wouldn't want to do because you will come into contact with people that some of us may not want to be in contact with.
I think that's a very good question. I think it has come with a degree of risk. A lot of that has been the level of online hate and abuse that I experience, and also, part of why I love my job is being able to really investigate what's unfolding on social media, whether that's disinformation, hate, polarization, the way that algorithms are affecting the way our society works. And so a lot of it means coming up close, face to face with the people who really believe this stuff or are causing harm on social media in some way. But I'm a real believer in, I don't just want to sit behind my phone or my computer. I want to be out there applying the same investigative journalism sort of techniques and approach that we have for decades, but instead to this new online world which is affecting all of us. And the price to be paid for that is being a bit of a lightning rod for all sorts, and possibly finding yourself in some not so easy situations, which I describe in the book what that's like, whether that's at rallies or whether that's ending up at a troll's house, or usually with the brilliant teams I work with at the BBC, whether that's podcast or Panorama and more. But yeah, a lot of people say to me, why do you do this job? But genuinely, I believe it's a really important public service, and I absolutely think investigative journalism in this area, which affects all of our lives, individual lives, but also it affects elections, it affects just anything big unfolding in the world. I think it's so important, and so I'm very happy to do it, even if it does make me an ultimate troll magnet.
Well, you see, I grew up in an era when there was a thing that we called at uni the dialectic, where you had, thesis and ultimately synthesis, thesis and antithesis, or antithesis and synthesis at the end. In other words, all of that was geared to getting some kind of compromise. It seems to me today that if you put forward your thesis about something, as you will have discovered, somebody somewhere is going to want to kill you.
Yeah, I think you're right, and I think a lot of that comes down to particularly the way that conversations unfold on social media. They're very polarised, and you know, stuff that is punchy and more extreme tends to get more attention. If you decide to post a very controversial opinion, it's probably more likely to get views and likes and engagement than a nuanced and quite kind of thought out view. And so one of the things that I spend quite a lot of my time doing is actually trying to take these conversations offline to speak to people in the real world, because I think it's only then that you're able to really truly talk about this stuff. And to that point as well, I often find that if you get too caught up in what people believe, it's not always that helpful. It's actually often the why that is of interest. And so a lot of the book is about me trying to understand and ask why people behave the way they do. And you know, when we talk about what people believe here, I'm talking about the most extreme conspiracy theories, the suggestion that COVID-19 was a hoax, that it was staged, that it never happened, that wars around the world are being staged, that people haven't really been killed, that terror attacks have been staged. I'm not talking about the more legitimate concerns and questions that people have, which can sometimes make them vulnerable to those more extreme beliefs, but often don't. And yeah, so I think that in order to avoid that kind of constant butting of heads, it's really important to be able to chat and to really meet people and understand why, and to genuinely want to understand. And I think that's some of the best advice I've ever had as a reporter. You know, whenever you speak to someone, don't just ask a list of questions, question the answers, and really want to know why, because if you don't, then you never really reveal anything.
But isn't the price of all of those things you talked about, those people who have their view, isn't that the price of a free society and free speech? You know, if people were allowed to have their say, and we were an educated population, I don't think we get the information. It's just a personal view. We don't get enough information about things. But if we were an educated populace, then none of this would be a problem, because people would see what was true and what wasn't.
I think that's a really good question, and freedom of expression is something that, you know, a lot of people talk to me about and get in touch with me about. And I think freedom of expression is incredibly important. But I think a lot of this is about, you know, people's ability to debate and have different opinions and to coexist without it then descending into threats and extreme hate and abuse. And, you know, I often compare the real town square. You know, I guess 40, 50, 60, 100 years ago, people would have gone out and had conversations in person, in a place in their local community, and they'd encounter all kinds of different people who they didn't agree with or who they did agree with, and they'd have those conversations in person. Now, the virtual town square is a place that is punctuated with disinformation and hate, and it's very polarised, and you tend to encounter a lot of people that agree with you, not so many people who don't agree with you, or you encounter people on either kind of extreme. You don't encounter the people perhaps who have a range of different views, which most people do. And so I think a lot of what I do, and you know, some of my trolls and some of my critics would say, well, you know, investigating this space is about censoring people, it's about limiting freedom of expression. That's absolutely not the case. In fact, you know, a lot of the investigations I do are about people who are being targeted with very extreme hate and abuse, who feel as though their ability to express their views freely and to share what they think and to exist on the social media platforms alongside everyone else are being limited in some way. And I think that's a really important part of this conversation, which is it's all about, in some ways, you know, my job is less a tech journalist and more from someone who's dealing in sort of sociology, really. You're trying to understand the way this is affecting society and our ability to talk to each other, and you know, the level of hate and threats I receive as a consequence of that. And I also find quite sinister when we think about freedom of expression. You know, I've had people turn up outside work and be very abusive in different ways. And you know, I think that in a democracy which prides itself on freedom of expression, intimidating and abusing journalists, investigative journalists, going into their workplace doesn't seem like the sort of thing you do if you really believe in freedom of expression.
No, I take your point. Do you think our readers deserve, though, the conspiracy theories that they sometimes engender? And what I'm thinking about here is that sometimes, as we know, I think it's probably indisputable, but, you know, let's put the caveat in, it could be argued, as we would say on the BBC, you know, it could be argued that if politicians play fast and loose with the truth, which, you know, I think pretty clearly some have, then really they cannot be surprised when people extrapolate from that. Take it a step further, and, you know, there you are, there's a conspiracy theory.
Yeah, I think that, I think you're totally right to point out that very legitimate examples of wrongdoing and corruption in politics and across the world fuel this stuff. And, you know, if you look at what if you look at the root causes of kind of belief in conspiracy theories and totally kind of evidence-free conspiracy theories, it tends to come from a lack of trust. And often people have very legitimate concerns and questions about what's going on and, where they feel that they have been wronged or let down or something really legitimate has happened, but then it unfortunately kind of leads to these more extreme conspiracy theories. And what I often say to people when I'm talking to them about this is, I really try and untangle the legitimate concern or question they have from the extreme stuff, because actually, in some ways they kind of undermine their own cause. If they start saying, this was staged, it was a hoax, they kind of move away from being able to level legitimate criticism and questions at, the way that powerful and rich people behave. Because, there are very real examples of wrongdoing that, and that's, in some ways that's how conspiracy theories work, right? It's about this kind of kernel of truth often. Something real and legitimate happens, or it feeds into it, and then people are able to extrapolate that, and it kind of snowballs into something bigger. And I think that, we'd be totally wrong to not acknowledge that, there are conspiracies that come true as well. There's stuff, there's stuff that people suspect. And someone asked me a really good question, actually, at an event I was at recently. They said to me, what's the difference between someone like Alan Bates, for example, who basically worked tirelessly to expose what was happening at the post office and to other postmasters, and then, a conspiracy theory? Would people have thought he was a conspiracy theorist? And I said, that's a really good question. And, the point being that someone like Alan Bates gathered a huge amount of evidence and, worked away to expose what was going on, very kind of courageously and alongside all sorts of other people. And that's the difference here, is that, often the conspiracy theory networks I'm dealing with are spreading stuff that is really, really way beyond the evidence. There just isn't the evidence to back up what they're saying. In fact, often what they're suggesting is almost kind of paranormal or supernatural. It's basically kind of impossible. And so I think that it's really, really important that we have that conversation, and we understand, I get into it in the book a bit, but we understand to what extent distrust in our public institutions, whether that's the government and politicians or the media, feel this stuff and play a role in exacerbating the problem, and also how conspiracy theories actually stop us often having legitimate conversations and debate about real wrongdoing that does happen, because it then becomes so binary. It's either like, this is an extreme conspiracy theory, or this is true. And actually often lots of stuff sits in the middle. I tend to deal in the most extreme stuff, but actually a lot of conversations and debates that need to be had are examples of real things where people do stuff that's bad and wrong, and then also stuff that's not true.
Where do you think the line, and I know that it's not the core of what you talk about in the book, and I promise you we will get into that and the characters that you met, but where is the line, do you think, crossed between questioning and theorising? Now look, I saw that line crossed in an era that was largely pre-digital. We didn't have the firestorm of digital media that we had now. I was on air the day that Diana died and had to break that news to London. It was a very difficult and emotional day. The first stage of that was the emotional impact, and then people begin to think about it. And as they started to think about it, there were people who started to ask questions. And the questions started with, how did Diana die? Then they morphed in some people's minds for a while into, was Diana murdered? And I'm very interested and have been through all these years. And of course we didn't have Instagram and TikTok and all the rest of it then. Thank goodness we didn't, I think, in many ways. But I'm just interested in how that line is walked towards by some people, and where the threshold is, how it's crossed.
Yeah, it's a very good question, and I think a lot of the people that I track down in the book are people who are going so far as to suggest things that there is loads of evidence they happened, didn't happen. That really kind of categorical, like, this was staged, there were crisis actors, people who were paid to act this stuff out, and often conspiracy theories that are causing very serious real-world harm, which is a lot of what I investigate, and causing real harm to the people who often have been caught up in, like the worst day of their lives, and then it's being denied in some way. I think when it comes to the stuff that sits in that kind of grey area, I always say this, but my job and the kind of investigative journalism I do can only exist alongside really, really good investigative journalism into legitimate wrongdoing and questioning. And, whenever anyone puts anything to me, I will always interrogate what they're saying. I will look at it. I'll, properly kind of like go through it, because, some of this stuff that's being alleged and that people are questioning, I'm an investigative journalist, if this stuff was real, it would be the biggest scandal of the century. Of course we look into this stuff. But I think the line is where it then starts to be kind of based in there's just a total absence of evidence. There is no tangible and concrete evidence to back up what the person is saying. And it's been so extrapolated and sort of like spun into something else, and you're having to say, oh, hang on a second, I don't think this happened. I think that there was a really interesting, I've done this other podcast recently called Why Do You Hate Me? And I investigate kind of extraordinary cases of online hate. And in one of the episodes, we talk about this concept of an ethical conspiracy theorist. Is it ever possible to be theorising and to do it in such a way that it doesn't cause harm to people? And I think, to some extent, yes. And it's really important that people are holding people to account, whether that's, the authorities, the police, whether that's governments, whether that's, all kinds of institutions and organisations. And so much of my job is holding the big social media companies to account, who are very rich, very powerful, and not very transparent at all. So I'm a big believer in that. But I think that for me the line really sits where, not just where it crosses into there is absolutely no evidence to back this up, but also when it starts causing really serious harm to people, you're alleging something that is totally false or harmful about them. I'm thinking about terror attack survivors I've interviewed who've had people, suggest that they were faking their injuries in some way. Families and people living through the very worst tragedies, who are then being faced with, a whole range of totally false allegations and hate directed at them, when, we can't even imagine what it's like living through some of this stuff in the first place, let alone dealing with the onslaught that follows.
More from Mariana Spring in just a moment, here on The Unexplained. Stay here.
On your mobile, on your wavelength, Talk Radio and Talk TV.
Know what it's like when you're flying back from some winter sun and you take an epic cloud pic, but it's got your sunburnt reflection in the window? Well, the new Samsung Galaxy S24 Plus sorts that. The built-in AI can remove annoying reflections and even touch up your pics so well you'll be drowning in fire emojis. Yes, babes.
Galaxy AI is here. Buy now from Samsung.com and get up to £370 off when you trade in your old smartphone. Purchase by 2nd of April. £370 based on Galaxy S23. Values vary by model and condition. T's and C's apply.
It's Lidl's massive garden event, with more green-fingered goodies than you can shake a rake at. Get a walk-in greenhouse for $49.99, a cold frame only $29.99, or a balcony railing planter for just $3.99. All from a Parkside range. New products in Lidl stores every week. Now that's big on quality and always Lidl on price. Limit offers subject to availability. Selected stores GB only.
This is an announcement by TTP Financial Compensation, a claims management company authorised and regulated by the Financial Conduct Authority. Following our successful campaign assisting customers of the MI Group and Lincoln Financial Group, we are now able to extend our service to customers of any insurance company or bank that received pension advice between 1988 and 1998. Text TTP to 60777. Text TTP to 60777. It is possible to present a claim yourself for free against the firms concerned, or through the Financial Ombudsman Service or the Financial Services Compensation Scheme.
Through breakfast, my skincare routine, my workouts, filming, whatever, I'm thinking just one thing. Is your door in the draw? Because in People's Postcode Lottery's April draws, there's a share of an incredible £24.7 million to be won. So come join 70% of postcodes across Great Britain already playing. And sign up before midnight on the 31st of March to play. Because good things come knocking with People's Postcode Lottery. PPL managed lotteries on behalf of good causes. 18+ conditions apply. Play responsibly. Not available in Northern Ireland.
When Danielle from Southampton sold her car with Motorway, she got more money. She put that extra money towards everything she needed to welcome her first child. Plus, the process was so quick and easy, it was one less thing to think about. Who got more money with Motorway? That's right, Mummy did. Oh yes, she did. Babies love me. Sell your car the more money way, where 84% of sellers sold for more. Motorway. Validated against 2 independent sources. Visit motorway.co.uk/claims.
5 minutes and you're done. You can do your own simple haircut in 5 minutes or less with innovative Beast Clipper from Skull Shaver. No more driving, waiting and paying every time you cut your hair. None of that. Skull Shaver products have over 100,000 5-star reviews worldwide and 30 days money-back guarantee. 5 minutes and you're done. The Beast Clipper at skullshaver.co.uk can do it. Skull Shaver, the time saver.
People are tuning into radio more than ever. Advertise here and get your message heard by up to 6.5 million switched on listeners every week. Email radio@news.co.uk.
The home of common sense, Talk Radio and Talk TV.
The Unexplained from Talk Radio. Now we return to my conversation with Marianna Spring. I actually have had people, I'm sure you have had too, who tell me that some of the videos we saw during COVID, and, you know, every time I mention COVID, I'm going to get a deluge of email from both sides of this, but, you know, the videos that we saw of people gasping their last in hospital during the worst of it, I often had people get onto me and say, those people don't exist. They were actors. They were put there. It was not this, it was not that. And I would be very interested to hear evidence of that. But of course, nobody who ever contacted me with that gave me evidence to suggest that those people were not exactly what they appeared to be. And that was sad victims of this thing that hit us in whatever way that it did and left them in a situation where they were dying.
Exactly, and I mean, I get totally the same. I've received hundreds of messages, often using this trope of crisis actors, this idea that people are being paid to act something out, but with absolutely no evidence to suggest that's the case. And, you know, you go and investigate these things and you find the real people who've lost their lives, the real families who've lost, like, their loved ones, whether it's their mum or their dad or their brother, doctors, nurses who have, you know, put themselves at serious risk to treat patients and, you know, working around the clock to do this stuff. And for them, this stuff, you know, certainly during COVID, was so distressing because I think again it comes down to this kind of almost like dehumanization. Like people, if people actually came, you know, face to face with bereaved families or with the people who were doing that work at the time, perhaps that would help them to realise that, you know, there's and it's exactly like you say. You know, I always say to people, give me the evidence. Where is the evidence that this person is an actor? Because I've investigated it and I found they're a real person and this is their name and this is what's happened. And they don't have that evidence. And like a bit of me, I in the book I separate it into the kind of true believers and then the non-believers with a question mark. And the non-believers are people I'd categorise as often the kind of leaders or the influencers in this space who are spreading conspiracy theories and disinformation, and they get something out of it, whether that's money or a following or fans. The true believers tend to be the devoted followers who I actually think genuinely believe this stuff. And some of me wonders whether they believe it because in some ways, you know, it's a bit nicer to believe that these people are actors and that people aren't dying in this way. And that
Well, I suspect also, Marianna, sorry to butt in here, but I suspect also there is comfort in being part of a community. If you're scared, and we were all scared, I was working from home, I was scared during COVID when we were queuing to go around the supermarket. If you're part of a community of some sort, you know, whatever that community might be, that can give you, I suspect, a nice warm feeling. So I guess that explains partly what those people are about.
Yes, and I think that is a huge, that is a massive explanation for why people become so committed to this kind of world of conspiracy theories. And I often kind of refer to them as conspiracy theory activists, because that's almost what they become. They become part of a kind of movement, and they become an activist. And I think, you know, I get into it in the book quite a lot, but I think an absence of local community and the ability to kind of connect with people in person leads people down this rabbit hole to these places where they actually seek out meaning and purpose and friendship, and they feel valued and important, and it makes it even harder to get out because your whole identity becomes, you know, part of this world, your friendships, your connections, you become more isolated from your real family and friends, and it's really difficult. And so, you know, I think that's a real pull for people who fall into this stuff. And I get into it quite a lot, you know, the psychology of why people believe conspiracy theories. And, you know, I tend to find that there are kind of common attributes shared by people who believe this stuff, and then they don't tend to be perhaps the things that people think they might be. And there are lots of misconceptions about people that believe conspiracy theories. People often think they must be not very clever or they're not very well. Actually, I tend to find they're very clever, they're hyper engaged, they're very curious, but they often have had a legitimate bad experience. They've been let down. They are, as we say, seeking out community and friendship and meaning. They're looking for purpose and agency and control. And when life feels unpredictable and uncertain, which certainly it did during the COVID-19 pandemic, and, you know, all kinds of bad stuff's happening all over the world, people turn to these kind of belief systems almost to make sense of it. And part of me can kind of understand why people do that, but unfortunately the byproduct is often quite serious harm for people who, you know, are caught up in this stuff and on the receiving end.
I understand all of that, but we've got to say that the authorities and officialdom do not help themselves very often. There is a dearth of information. Plus, of course, we know that investigative journalism is very, very expensive. I wonder if there was a guy called Roger Cook who used to get himself beaten up on a regular basis by going into places for the BBC that other people wouldn't go.
Yeah.
You know, and that's expensive stuff. You have to pay their insurance bills and, you know, medical costs and the cost of keeping the crew safe and all that stuff. So people don't do it now. And I think that's a bit of a failing. There are people at the moment who have their reasons for questioning the excess deaths number connected with COVID. You know, there are, if you look online, there are people who do that quite regularly, and they've flagged up that very recently, as you will know, Mariana, the methodology for calculating and tabulating excess deaths in the United Kingdom was changed. And, you know, it's hard to blame people when they say, well, look at that. What we needed there, and I'm not saying that there's anything, you know, untoward about that, it's just a different way of doing the stats, I guess. But we needed very clearly for somebody to come out and make a news story out of it in the government and put a spokesperson forward, and as far as I'm aware, that didn't happen.
Yeah, I think again a lot of this comes down to communication, and it comes down to answers, and it comes down to people sharing information. And you know, I work with brilliant colleagues at the BBC across all kinds of expertise, whether that's health or whether that's politics, or you know, lots of their job involves fact checking and interrogating these kinds of issues. And sometimes, you know, and my job is very much investigating basically everything bad on social media, and so it's about kind of understanding how we can be misled and what's going on and the way this stuff spreads and everything else. I think that it is totally just right to point out that an absence of information and people feeling like they've got to do it themselves because no one else is doing it, is what kind of can then lead people down the rabbit hole, or to kind of add up 1 + 1 = 4, and they've actually kind of pieced together slightly the wrong thing, and it doesn't quite point towards what they're saying, but then they don't feel listened to or validated, and so they kind of fall deeper into that world. And you know, that it's very different to how it was before, in a good way, that social media gives everybody a voice, and they're able to, you know, say, oh, hang on, I've been looking into this and I've found this. But actually, you know, also, and I say this as someone who works at the BBC, there are brilliant journalists who do this work and interrogate this stuff, and that's where, again, it comes down to trust, which is, if people don't trust that journalists are, you know, I say this a lot, that you know, my job, and the most important bit of my job, is standing up for people who are being harmed by horrible content on social media and feel like no one is listening to them, that they cannot, you know, they cannot expose what's happened to them to very powerful social media companies who they feel like aren't listening to them. They want policymakers and other people to be aware of what's happening, and my job is to kind of investigate their cases and to give them a voice. And I think that there are so many journalists who think and feel like that, and I feel very sad that there are people who feel like they're not represented in that way, and journalists aren't doing that. And I think part of the solution, aside from us talking about kind of communication and, you know, people sharing information and showing how they do their workings, is journalists, you know, aside from the institutions, kind of is separately journalists actually showing their workings. And I more than ever like to try and take people with me, and I hope the book does this as well, but kind of show people how I investigate this stuff and what it's like, and actually, you know, getting properly stuck in and face to face and understanding what's going on. Because I think that people, you know, the whole kind of ecosystem, and I hate using that word, but the whole kind of ecosystem of the media and social media has changed, and it's really important that people trust us to do our jobs.
What's it like to face meet somebody who has, in an online sense, attacked you?
I tend to find that actually when you meet people in person, like all of the, you know, I guess like we're human beings, aren't we? And like most human beings are polite to each other and not abusive. And I tend to find when I meet people face to face, they want to engage and have a conversation, and they appreciate that I want to understand, and I want to fairly and accurately reflect what they have to say, and I want to investigate and interrogate. And you know, I've done interviews, which I talk about in the book, where I say, yeah, of course, I allow, you know, a conspiracy theory newspaper editor to ask me questions. You know, because he said to me, well, I'll do an interview with you as long as I can ask you stuff too. And I said, well, of course you can. I'm really happy for you to ask me questions, but I want to be able to ask you them too. And that was the agreement, and we went and had this very sort of revealing conversation. And so, you know, I tend to find when you meet people in person that they are very, they're much kind of politer perhaps, and it's interesting then seeing how it unfolds afterwards, because you can have a really kind of interesting conversation where you kind of are back and forth and you're questioning someone and you're quizzing them and you're asking what they think, and it's very revelatory, and then afterwards they'll post something really abusive on social media and you'll think, hang on a second, that's not how we left it. I thought
and why do you think that is, Mariana? Is it because they don't want to be seen to have compromised or sold out in any way by talking to you?
I think so. I think a lot of it is also about this kind of idea of fans and followers, that it's almost like you feel like you've sort of been in like a boxing match almost. It's like they're then kind of going to their fans and sort of giving some trash talk about the other person. And I just find that, I'd never do that. So I just find it really, you're like, wow, okay, hang on, this is, and it's almost like you watch, I say it in the book, but you almost watch kind of reality being distorted in front of your eyes, because you think, I was there, and we recorded the whole thing, and I know exactly what happened, and that's not what happened. But it suits the narrative and the crowd that they're playing to. And again, some of this comes down to how social media works, which is, by choosing your tribe and choosing your villain, I guess, you can grow your online following and the engagement you get, and people will, it's actually coming away and saying, oh, I had this conversation, it was actually really, it was really interesting, or it was really, like that doesn't, people are far less likely to like and follow and comment. But if you say, I absolutely hated this evil woman and all of this kinds of stuff, you're way more likely to get people engaging with you. And I think that's a huge driver and a part of it.
I think we all have to have time for each other. I remember interviewing a vehemently left-wing politician and doing my job by balancing and putting back other arguments, and he got very angry. But at the end of it all, and this was a very well-known person, in fact, he was well known on the left wing, Tony Benn, a wonderful man, a man who had huge respect. And I had this conversation with him, and I pushed back at him, and it became rather heated. I think he might have been having a difficult morning. Lovely man. And I put the phone down, and we ended our conversation. He phoned me back 5 minutes later to apologise for it slightly getting, but didn't really get out of hand. I thought nothing of it. But we seem to have lost that. Maybe that's part of the problem. Can I ask you this, because we don't have a lot of minutes left? Did you have any contact with Alex Jones or his people? Because as we know, Alex Jones was ordered to pay something like $900 million US, a fortune, because it was claimed that 8 victims of Sandy Hook, the shooting, was essentially, it was a hoax, which of course it was not, and he paid the price for that. Have you had contact with him, and do you get the sense that things like that have made any kind of difference to the space?
Yeah, so I did reach out to Alex Jones. He's never responded to me kind of for various investigations I've done. However, I did manage to speak to this man called Rob, who actually worked very closely with him at InfoWars, and actually testified against him in that recent kind of trial involving the Sandy Hook families, where he was ordered to pay all of those damages for suggesting the shooting was staged. And the kind of hate that it triggered, and that was very revealing. And I feature Rob in the book, just about what drove Alex Jones and the kind of ability to build this kind of conspiracy theory industry. And I think that's really important to think about here, because a lot of people are increasingly turning to legal action as a way to get sort of accountability for people who spread this kind of stuff and cause them harm online, because they feel like that's the only way of perhaps deterring it and stopping it happening. One of the most shocking cases I investigate in the book involves the Manchester Arena survivors of the terror attack in 2017 being tracked down and accused of staging their injuries, and one of them is currently taking legal action against the conspiracy theorists here in the UK, very much kind of inspired by the actions taken by the Sandy Hook parents who won all those damages against Alex Jones. A similar case is unfolding also in Ireland, a woman whose son took his own life, but was then featured on the front page of a conspiracy theory newspaper, sort of suggesting otherwise, that his death was linked to the COVID-19 vaccine. She is also taking legal action. So I think that the kind of repercussions of what's happened with Alex Jones in America has sort of set a new blueprint, I guess, for how people who are victims of this can seek out justice and to try and stop it happening to them again. And they've sort of realised that money, perhaps, because this is an industry, whether you're making millions of dollars and pounds, or whether you're making just a living, it's an effective way of stopping people doing this, because they risk not making any money from it anymore, or being able to do that. And I think that has been perhaps the biggest change brought around by that case. But then, as lots of people I know taking this legal action have said to me, it's by no means a solution, because actually, it's expensive taking legal action, and it's hard, and it often makes, as it has for all of these people who I'm talking about, makes them more of a target for hate and other nasty stuff. It's not an easy thing to do at all. And so, again, big question for the social media companies as well.
We have about 90 seconds, and it's a big question to ask in the 90 seconds, but I think we've kind of come to a synthesis here that I believe people deserve free speech. but they need to be very clearly made aware of the fact. And politicians have to play the part by telling us more truth, but they have to be aware that free speech, if you say what you think, and that has consequences and it hurts people, then you have to be accountable.
Totally, and you know, that's why, you know, almost I have a kind of test for everything I investigate. It either is so viral that it's important for me to look into it, or it's causing very serious real world harm. And you know, it is the greatest privilege, I think, of my job to be able to stick up for the average person who is being affected by this kind of hate and conspiracy theories that are causing them very serious harm. And I genuinely think, you know, people often say to me, surely doing this job you must kind of lose your faith in humanity a bit. But actually, I find that most people are good, and most people perhaps are doing this, they don't realise the harm that they're causing, and they don't realise the real world consequences of it.
So this is one way to find out about it. Mariana, thank you so much for this. The book is Among the Trolls, My Journey Through Conspiracy Land. And we've been speaking with Mariana Spring. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
My thanks to Mariana Spring, the BBC's first disinformation and social media correspondent. Her book is Among the Trolls. In the next hour here on The Unexplained, Dr. David Whitehouse, we're going to talk space. We'll also talk spirits and demonology with Jason McLeod. Don't go away.
On DAB+, on the app, Talk Radio and Talk TV.
Worn out, busy day. Don't let tiredness get in the way when you just can't get going. Berocca can help you face the lag. Formulated with 11 vitamins and minerals, including vitamins B6 and 12 to help support energy release and reduce tiredness and fatigue. Berocca, face the